What is up? Welcome back to the Tackle Prop Show here, brought to you by Daily Fantasy Statement Games. I'm your host, Johnny. You can find me on X at JohnnyFreakinF1. This week, for week 2, I brought 5 bankable picks, which I like. 4 of them are not juice picks, but one of them is. I'll save that one for last. And bottom line, I think these are just all bankable plays. So if you're looking for some tackle props here, if you like playing the dirty D side like me on the defense, betting on that, I got you covered. So let's get right into it with those 5 picks for week 2. Before I get into my first pick, I want to lead off by saying if you or anyone you know has a problem gambling, refer them or make the call yourself to 1-800-GAMBLER to get yourself in a better position. But if you have the money, you have the means, you can afford to lose a little bit. That's hopefully not what we're going to do out here today. But yeah, the first of the 5 picks is a pretty bankable one here, very comfortable with, and that is Kyle Hamilton of the Ravens to get over 5.5 combined tackles. The line is set at 0.85. So what that means is this is a likely to happen bet, and that's okay. I'm all about bankability here. I like to mix and match, 3 or 4 of these legs, put them in a parlay. Stay in your means. If you like offense, sprinkle one or two of these tackle props in here, and I think they're pretty bankable. So very likely to happen. And we'll start it off on the top with Kyle Hamilton. Looking at week 1. I'll start by saying this. Kyle Hamilton's opponent is the Cleveland Browns this week. Of course, we expect Baltimore to win this game marginally. But week one versus the Bengals, the Cleveland Browns let up 12 combined tackles to the starting safety for the Bengals, and that is Jordan Battle. Big volume tackler there at the safety position, and Kyle Hamilton can be the same as well. And Kyle Hamilton not only had a productive game last week 1, and hit this mark. He also hit this in 9 out of the 17 games played in 2024. And like we said, Cleveland should be down in this game. It is a division game, so I'm not thinking it's going to be 60-0 or whatever they are favorited. I think they're double-digit point favorites over the Browns, and for good reason. But keep in mind, Joe Flacco has thrown for 290 yards in week 1 versus the Bengals. Nonetheless, he had a great season last year when he's under the helm. There's quarterback for the Browns. So hopefully he can sustain some drives. We know there's going to be plenty of throwing. We expect Cleveland to be down in this game, which is great game script for Kyle Hamilton. So he's getting the snaps. We know the kind of prowess he is, that high-end defensive back as far as not only playmaking but tackling as well. And so should be a pretty easy line for Kyle Hamilton to hit. Pretty attainable here, and at only 5.5 combined tackles. I could see a world where he gets 7 or 8. So I think he hits this pretty easily. Moving on to my second guy, my only under for this week. Only one pick out of 5 is an under, and I'm kind of a hater on this guy. Not only in IDP racking up tackles, but here when we look at bets too, and I think he's got a high line that attributes to it. But Alex Anzalone. I'm looking for him to go under his line of 7.5 combined tackles. The odds are at 0.89 right now, and he's getting a matchup versus Chicago, which I think is absolutely putrid. Chicago looked horrible. Maybe I don't think it can get any worse here in week 2 for Chicago. So we'll talk about that in a second. But Alex Anzalone, we know he's a full-time player. That doesn't really bode well for chasing unders, but not really the tackle guy there. He's only getting older. Jack Campbell is the middle linebacker. They're both playing 100% of snaps, but the volume tackler here is Campbell, and we're not even going to bring his name up outside of that. However, Alex Anzalone, week 1, in those 100% snaps, only totaled 4 tackles versus Green Bay, which I would have thought would be a better matchup. Not saying he's only going to have 4 tackles, maybe 5, maybe 6, but I don't see 8. We need him under 8 tackles. So I think this is a pretty comfy line here. He's hit the under in 2024, 8 out of the 10 games he's played. So, odds are on our side. 80% of the time last year, he hit the under, which is very comforting to hear. And again, going back to the matchup, Chicago week 2, the Bears only gave up 13 tackles combined to Blake Cashman, Ivan Pace, and of course we know Cashman is out, did not finish that game, is on IR. but then Eric Wilson stepped up. So you have three linebackers. I mean, Blake Cashman in a game could compile 13 tackles, and it took three linebackers to get 13 tackles versus the Vikings last week. So, you know what? I just think this is a horrible matchup for Anzalone. I don't think he's the volume tackle guy. I think we started to see his line kind of come down, maybe even snaps come down. You know, as it stands right now, Detroit needs Alex Anzalone, but the production, I think, as far as tackling is going to slide when we look back at 2025. Alex Anzalone was a great tackler at one point. I don't think he is anymore. Age is maybe catching up. But nonetheless, I do think that this is going to be a little bit better Chicago showing than it was in week one. You know, any game hopefully they play from this point on will be better than that second half of week one. So I expect Caleb Williams to be a little bit better, sustain more drives. But nonetheless, Alex Anzalone, 5-6 tackles. Even if they do play a little bit better on the offensive side, the Bears, 8 tackles is too steep here. And I think, like I said, week 2, week 3, as the season goes on, we're going to see Alex Anzalone's line come down back to earth. But right now, it's just too sky high. So let's take advantage on this under. Another question is, can Chicago improve? There's still huge doubt about Caleb Williams. Of course, if Chicago can't stay on the field, then that means not many tackle opportunities for any of the Detroit Lions. But we're just concerned about Alex Anzalone here. So, hey, if you're taking the under here, you're hoping that Caleb Williams and company comes out rough again, and then at that point, the Lions are just running the ball down their throat and sapping time off the clock. So, it would be a blessing, in disguise here for Alex Anzalone. Only under I have this one. Moving on to my third guy, Jordan Brooks. Let's talk about his line. I like it to take the over here. I know it's pretty steep. I know it's not a beautiful matchup like it was for the last week for the Colts in a blowout, but I still like Jordan Brooks to go over 7.5 combined tackles. The odds are almost even here at 0.88. A little bit about Brooks. I mean, first things first, versus the Colts last week, 14 tackles, 14 combined tackles. Of course, it was a blowout. Of course, game script is going to make that look better. He's not going to average 14 tackles a game. But when you look at the linebacker next to him, Tyrell Dodson also had 13 tackles in that game. So 2 linebackers and 27 tackles against the Colts. Again, blowout, outlier game. But, here's to show you that they can both be bangers. But let's talk about Brooks as being the number one linebacker there, the tackle getter. I think, Brooks and Dodson, who's going to get the most double-digit tackle games. And I'd put a good couple units on Brooks doing that, and that's what we want to hear for this week 2 matchup versus New England. And, I don't think this is going to be a blowout one way or another. I think this is going to be a close game. And sometimes that's all you need, you don't want to risk their blowouts. Sometimes you're on the short end of the stick. Game script doesn't work out in your favor. And maybe, Miami is just that bad. I do think they're a pretty bad team. Called it from week 1. Before week 1, thought they were going to be pretty bad with the defense they had. But, offense looked horrendous week 1. But here's to hoping they can rebound a little bit and not get, blown out. But even if they do, that means, if New England is up in this game, hopefully they just run the ball down the throat of Miami, and then that leads to Jordan Brooks probably getting another double-digit tackle game. Another thing going for Jordan Brooks in this prop is that, week 2 here, Travion Henderson, maybe a changing in the guard. Maybe they look to get him more involved. If they're up in games, they can both get him and Stevenson involved. So maybe, game script is going to work out, and maybe they want to kind of audition these 2 running backs. So that's kind of a blessing in this matchup as well. Again, we said Miami is bad. They look really bad. Talking about productivity last year for Jordan Brooks, played 17 games, full season. 10 out of those 17 games, he's hit the over here. So very comforting there. Majority of the time he's hitting the over, and this is a modest line again, even though the odds aren't juice where they shouldn't be. This is a modest line for Jordan Brooks, but very attainable here and a pretty solid matchup, quite frankly. So last icing on the cake here for you. Jordan Brooks, of course, played the Patriots 2 times last year. He was also on the Dolphins again, but had those 2 games versus the Patriots. He had 9 tackles in one of them and 7 tackles in the other. So one of them was, good for us. One of them hit the over. The other one was the under. But you put them together, 9 plus 7 is 16. Divide that by 2. He had the average of 8 tackles a game. So averages are right there with us. Obviously, this is not a money in the bank. No bet is, but I do think I would call this a bankable bet still. Moving on to my fourth pick, and that is another safety. This will be, I have 2 linebackers and 2 safeties so far. We'll surprise you on the last one, but Josh Mattellis from the Vikings, over 5.5 combined tackles. The odds on underdog are 0.84. In Josh Metellus, week 1, just barely hit this versus Chicago with 6 tackles. Like we said, rough showing by Chicago. Of course, they were throwing the ball, especially in the second half when they could stay on the field. But still, Josh Metellus was able to hit this line, 100% snap player, and that's a big, big perk when it comes to Josh Metellus' game. Last year, he kind of let us down in the tackle department, but as a whole, in 2024, only played 87% of snaps. The fact that he went out in week 1 and garnered 100% of snaps makes it more comforting, more bankable to hit this prop here. And one thing I can say is I already know that Andrew Van Ginkel is ruled out. Blake Cashman is ruled out. I think that just alone, those guys are huge volume tacklers. So I think there's going to be more to eat, more tackles to soak up for Metellus. Chicago has something to prove, like we said before. They weren't able to sustain drives. We do expect them to be throwing the ball, not only because they should be down in this game, in my opinion, but also because, look at their supporting cast. DJ Moore, you got Colston Loveland, Romo Dunze on the outside, and then Luther Burton, hopefully to get more involved than he did in week 1. And don't forget, Minnesota gave up the most air yards in 2024. Not essentially based in efficiency, but just overall gave up the most air yards. So that's kind of good news here, right? We want to see Caleb Williams get the chance to not just get sacked. Andrew Van Ginkel's out. That's a huge, proponent of getting sacks. So him being out, kind of helps Metellus. Hopefully Caleb can get that ball down the field where Metellus can make some wrap-ups. And all we need is 6 here. Not promising on the 2024 side of things. Only hit over 6 combined tackles in 8 out of the 17 games. So not even majority. But again, like I'd mentioned, that was on 87% of snaps. I'm not saying guaranteed that, Josh Metellus is going to be a 100% snap player the rest of the season. But what I can probably bank on is it's going to be 100% in week 2 when you got no Blake Cashman and you got no Andrew Van Ginkel. I understand they don't play the same position, but Josh Metellus is a chess piece. Maybe they move him a little bit up in the box more, get closer to the line of scrimmage, and kind of compensate for that loss at linebacker with Cashman. And versus Chicago, very promising stat here in 2024. His 2 games, of course, it's in division game. 2 games versus the Bears in 2024. First one, 7 tackles. We like that. Hits the over. Second game, 10 tackles. So 2 games, 17 tackles. That's a nice average of 8.5 tackles per game. Boom, that's over 3 of what we need. So Josh Metellus pretty comfortable with this one. Just modest line, over 5.5 combined tackles. Once again, the odds are at 0.84. And finally, my last bet, the 5th one. This is my juice play. Probably my favorite one. I'm very confident. I think this is a very bankable line here, and we get juice on top of that on underdog, and that's Marcus Siegel, rookie safety for the San Francisco 49ers. He's got a matchup versus the New Orleans Saints, which was a juicy matchup. The Saints, I'm sorry, not the Saints. Siegel had 6 combined tackles in his debut. 100%. They gave him the full-time job, 100% next to Jason Pinnock of snaps in week 1 versus Seattle. And Seattle, if he hit it for Seattle, we should be looking better versus New Orleans. Seattle, very run-heavy team. They had Sam Darnold only have 16 completions, 150 yards. And Marcus Siegel was still able to swing this 6 tackles on 100%. So a little bit even more confident. Siegel was a guy to watch out in week 1. He's definitely a guy to watch out in week 2. Not only in IDP, fantasy football, but here as far as these tackle props as well. New Orleans gave up 18 tackles to Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson combined in week 1, so that's very juicy here. I had mentioned Jason Pinnock. He's the guy that is playing next to Marcus Siegel, and Jason Pinnock, we've seen him be more of a free safety, which is encouraging. They both had 63% of box snaps in week 1, so Not to say that Jason Pinnock was playing deep in that one. Kind of the same alignment here, more or less. But I think Siegel's the guy when it comes to tackles at the end of the season. Marcus Siegel, if he holds down that job when Malik Mustafa comes back, he should no doubt be the safety there that has the most tackles on the team. So we hit last week with 6 tackles on Siegel. We get a better matchup. We get away from Seattle. We now face New Orleans, and one thing we could see is with Spencer Rattler. We were wondering what was the offense going to look like. Of course, we're going to see a lot of Alvin Kamara, but the big surprise was Juwan Johnson getting, what was it, 11 targets, 8 catches, and 76 yards. So hopefully we can run that back again, which means we're not throwing the ball deep. Siegel can get closer to the line of scrimmage, and things are going to look good from there. So Marcus Siegel, not a household name by any means. Of course, when you only have one game to your resume, nothing's bankable. But at the same time, the snaps are there, the alignment was there, the production was there versus a tougher matchup in Seattle. So once again, I like this line very much. Marcus Siegel over 5.5 combined tackles, and you get some juice here at 1.07 is the odds on underdog. So once again, Kyle Hamilton, number one pick was over 5.5 combined tackles for 0.85. My second pick, Alex Anzalone, under 7.5 combined tackles, 0.89. 3 was Jordan Brooks, over 7.5 combined tackles at 0.88. Fourth was Josh Mattellis, over 5.5 combined tackles, 0.85. And last but not least, again, Marcus Siegel, over 5.5 combined tackles. The only juice play at plus one, or I should say, 1.07. So, let me know what you think about this. Again, these are just suggestions. You're not saying you have to go put all 5 of these on a parlay. I surely will myself. I do every week. And these are the 5 most bankable bets I found. So that's what I'm trying to kind of do here is just give you bankability. Like I said, if you at the top here, if you want to take a couple of these bets, sprinkle them in with what you do on your bets account, that's great. That's my goal for you. And also give me some, maybe some of you have some different lines that you thought, and we can talk about in the comments section. Let me know if you have any questions as far as snaps, alignments, that kind of thing. As always, bet responsibly. Good luck in your week 2 endeavors, and not only the bet side, but hopefully fantasy football side too. And we will see you back next time on the Daily Fantasy Statement Games channel. So best of luck in week 2. Bless up.